We are just going to go through what we have gone through with the other group. Okay, so yesterday we talked about a computer system. Uh, we saw that it's made out. Yes, I think the lab attendant said the password is student. If you have a problem, you can raise your hand and lab attendant. Someone needs your help here. She needs your help. She says the password isn't working. Okay, so we said a computer is made up of two main components, which was the hardware and the software. And we said these, because most of the computers here, I think, are not working, isn't it? You're going to switch them on. Yeah, for now we can just pay as he helps us out. Maybe for this group we'll be using the other lab because you're not so many. And the other lab has more working computers. But that will happen tomorrow. For today we are here. No need to run. So we are saying our hardware devices are categorized into these about five. We have the input devices, we have the memory devices, we have the processing devices, we have the output, and then the storage. And this also makes up what we call the computing cycle. For those of you who are in the earlier meeting yesterday, we noticed this also gives a description of how a computer works. Yes. Oh, you're calling him. A computer captures input as data, keeps it temporarily in the memory, processes it according to user's instructions, then outputs it as information, and this can be stored. So our computer inputs data, temporarily stores it in memory, processes it according to the instructions given. Then after processing, this is output as information, which can be stored as soft copy or hard copy. Basically, that's a computer and how it works. Okay. Now, yesterday we had gone through the input devices. And for today, we are starting with we looked at the input. Okay, we said these are used to capture data. We mentioned devices like the microphones. We mentioned devices like the mouse, the keyboard, touch screen, the sensors. A good example of a sensor is nowadays most phones have fingerprint sensors for security as a password, etc. But today we are starting with memory. Now, we usually have two kinds of memory. We have the RAM and the, but in most cases, in basic computer language, whenever we talk about memory, we are referring to the, are we together? Though ROM is also memory. Now, RAM stands for random access. ROM stands for now, I don't want us to confuse ROM with storage. Are we together? Storage works like ROM, but it's not fully ROM. We are going to get to that. In this class, as we talk about memory, we shall be mainly focusing on the RAM. Okay? Our focus is to pick up things that you really find useful practically. So whenever I talk about memory, we'll be talking about the RAM. Now, we started with an example here. Assuming there are two phones here. One has 2 GBs of RAM and 256 GBs of storage. The other has 8 GBs of RAM and 64 GBs of storage. If these phones are the same price, which one would you choose? The first one or the second one? Anyone who goes for the first? Why are you choosing the second one? The second one has a bigger storage. We are saying the first one has 2 GBs of RAM and it has a storage of 256. The second has 8 GBs of RAM but a lesser storage. You're choosing the second one. Why? It has bigger storage. The storage is here. This one is bigger. So if your focus is storage, then this would be the better option. Are we together? So which phone are we choosing? You can choose any of your choice. The second, what reason? The reason can't be storage. RAM. Why? Why do you choose 8 GBs of RAM? Processing speed. Now, what I notice is, all of us understand that RAM, the more the RAM, the better our device, our computer performs, but we don't know how it actually comes about. Now, choosing a phone here would depend on your goal. If your goal is storage and not running a lot of things at the same time, then I'll go for this. Are we together? If let's say I have a lot of files, I have a lot of videos, I have a lot of photos, this is way bigger storage. But if my purpose, if my goal is to run a lot of things at the same time, then I'll go to the one with bigger RAM. Now, how does this work? As our computer runs, as our smartphone runs, whenever I input something, primarily, it's temporarily run in the RAM. What I'm doing right now on my computer is not running in my storage, but it's running on the RAM. The same applies to your phone. When you open up WhatsApp and you're using it, at that instance, it's running in your RAM. Are we together? When you go ahead, assuming you're running WhatsApp, you go ahead and download a video. After watching it, you close it. That video goes to the... When you're watching it, it's playing in the RAM. I hope we get the difference. Now, if you go ahead and you open, let's say you run WhatsApp, you run TikTok, maybe you run Doom Player, you run all this at the same time. They'll be running in that. But when I go ahead and install WhatsApp, TikTok, maybe Facebook, the apps I install are stored in the storage. So if I have a bigger storage, I'm able to store very many apps. But the problem will come when I want to use all of them at the same time. Using them at the same time is determined by the amount of RAM I have. I hope we are together. And that's how RAMs comes into play. Now, how does that work? The more apps I run, the more they occupy my RAM. Okay? For example, if I have 2 GBs of RAM and I open up WhatsApp, WhatsApp is one of those apps that use a lot of RAM on your phone. From my 2 GBs, my WhatsApp can take up 1 GB. If I've taken up 1 GB, I'm remaining with, I go ahead and open up TikTok. TikTok goes ahead and uses up maybe 500 MBs. You notice I'm remaining with only 500 MBs. And that's when your phones will start to hang. Smartphones nowadays can even warn you that your memory is getting occupied. Clear some apps. If you don't clear and keep running apps opening, some may fail to open, or that's when your phone or computer slows down, or it just hangs and you can't do anything anymore. But if I have like 8 GBs of RAM, I open WhatsApp uses 1 GB. Open another app, maybe it uses 1 GB. I'm still remaining with a whole 6. I hope we see how the RAM affects the operation of your device. But if it comes to storage, one with a larger storage will of course be better. If your focus is on how fast your device operates, then the higher size of RAM is the best option. I hope we see how the impact of RAM and how it determines the speed. Okay, now let's talk about RAM. We usually call RAM memory. Now we are saying in this class, whenever we talk about memory, will be meaning RAM. RAM in full is random access. And we are saying this is also what we call the temporary memory. Why is it temporary? For example, what I'm doing here, what you're seeing on the screen. If my computer happens to go off abruptly now without saving, I can't be able to retrieve this. That's because it's running in the temporary memory. It doesn't store once power is off. We'll also call it volatile memory. And volatile will usually mean if power goes off, I can't access whatever was in my RAM. It's also called the physical memory. Okay? It's physical memory because it's tangible. And if you have physical memory, it means you'll also have virtual memory. We'll look at that as well. We also call it primary memory. Primary brings out its function more. It's the main, something primary is main, it's major. Actually, if my computer has no RAM, my computer won't even power up. I'm not able to do anything on my computer if there is no RAM. It won't even power up. And that's how RAM impacts the operation of our computer. RAM comes in sizes, it also comes in speeds, and it also comes in categories, which we'll look at. So from RAM, let's say I'm typing something. I type it, it's loaded up in the memory. Now my processor processes whatever is running. Actually, whatever is running in the memory is what my processor works on. That brings us to a processor. That brings us to what we call processing devices. Do you know some of these? At least you know a processing device. Which device do you know? CPU. Do we see a CPU where we are? Where is it? Does anyone have a different view? Now that's not a CPU. I usually say calling this a CPU is like saying the head is the brain. Where do we find the brain? In the head. That means the CPU is inside. We call this a systems. We call that box a systems unit. At time we call it a system. And inside there, that's where we'll find inside here, that's where we'll find the CPU, that's where we'll find the RAM, that's where we'll find the hard disk. Actually, it's just a container that houses the main computer hardware components. So this is not the CPU. Today, English teachers have also said some bogoy. This is a systems unit. It's not a CPU, right? The CPU is found in there. Let me just bring up a picture of a CPU. Now, a CPU is as small as this. Hope you see how it looks in the palm. Very small. And that's what controls all the operations of my computer. It's the brain of the computer. That's what we call it in simple English. That's a CPU. Now, a CPU is one of those processing devices. And it's the main. Actually, we say it's the main. But there are other processing devices. There's what we call the GPU. And this usually stands for graphics processing unit. Now, even when the CPU is the main processing device in my computer, at times it gets overloaded and there are some tasks it may not handle as fast as possible. For example, if you do gaming, for example, if you're a video editor, for example, if you're a graphics designer, for example, if you're someone who works with photo editing, your normal CPU may be a little slow handling those tasks that heavily rely on graphics. Another good example of someone who needs this processor, if you're a teacher who plans to start live streaming using your computer and you're going to use some graphics in your live streaming, if you're a pastor and you live stream your services using a computer, you need a computer that has a GPU, such that your main processor is not overloaded with processing some of those high quality graphics. So a GPU is a processing unit that deals with graphics. Videos, images, flyers, you're designing a banner, you're live streaming. You need a GPU to handle that. Then you have other devices, other processing devices like the sound cards. If you've been to a studio, you must have seen this device, a sound card. Sound card. Now, a sound card handles audio processing. Let's say 4 people are recording a song and each one has a microphone. The computer needs help on how it can process that. And usually you connect your sound card to your computer and it handles that. Though the computer itself has a smaller sound card, which only takes one microphone. There's always that, if you look at your computer, if you look at those computers, there's a small pin, a pin looks like a headphone jack, where you can connect earphones. You can also connect a microphone there. Okay? Okay. I hope you're still on the same page. You're saying the processor controls all operations on the CPU, on the PC. The processor controls our hardware and software. And these are some of the processing device I have just mentioned. CPU, GPU, sound card. These are some of the main ones, though there are others that are little minor, but these are main. Now, we are saying the CPU is our main. If your CPU has a problem, your computer won't even power on. But a GPU is just made for graphics. That means if my computer has no GPU, it doesn't mean that it won't operate. It will operate very well. A GPU only comes in when I'm dealing with heavy graphics, as I've mentioned. You're a graphics designer, you're a video editor, you're a live streamer. We come to output devices. What do you know about output devices? What do you know about output devices? They display information, they give out information, they relay information, etc. Those are output devices. Can you mention some of these? Some of these already listed here. We have the monitors, you have the screens, you have the projectors. These usually display information as soft copy. Okay? Whatever we see on a screen, what we have here is a projector. Those right there are monitors, etc. We have speakers. I hope you all know the purpose of speakers. In speakers, that's where we find earphones, headphones, etc. We have printers. What do printers do? They do what? Printers print. Printers print. It's like saying a mouth. Now, printers transform our soft copy. They transform. We can't say printer prints. Soft copy to hard copy. Have you heard of a plotter before? Have you seen those billboards on the road? The signposts, the banners, those are printed or they are made by what we call a plotter. So this is how a plotter would look like. If you've been to NASA, you've seen this. You've seen such? Some of you have, I believe. Those are plotters. They are made for high and large size printing. We come to the storage devices. Now we are saying storage devices have all the characteristics of, but they are different from ROM. We are saying, we started by saying in memory, we can have RAM and we are saying RAM is temporary memory, whereas ROM is permanent. Now, if you notice RAM and ROM, our memory components are usually small size. And one of the differences between ROM and storage is the size. Okay? ROM devices, ROM memory chips are usually very small, and they store very small programs. For example, the BIOS. We are going to look at the BIOS as we proceed today. They store very small data or information, and ROM is usually mounted on what we call the motherboard. We see the motherboard, whereas storage devices just connect onto the motherboard. They can connect via cable, they can connect externally via a USB. Those are storage devices. Storage devices are usually very big in size. Nowadays, you can, I hear the new iPhone 17 has storage of up to 1 terabyte. Are we together? but that's not ROM. ROM chips actually usually call these ROM chips, and they're entirely made as memory. So we move to storage. Storage are just devices we use to permanently keep our files. And we mentioned some of these here. We talked about the USB disk. We talked about the floppy disk. We talked about the hard disk. Just a minute. Okay, these are some of those storage devices we mentioned: USB disk, floppy, hard disk drive, magnetic tape, solid state drives, CDs and DVDs, then the cloud storage. I believe many of us have worked with the USBs. A USB is also what we can call a pen drive. At times we call it a flash disk drive. We usually use these, they are plug and play. Plug and play means I plug it in my PC, it reads right away. I transfer files that I want onto it, then I move it onto another. That's a USB. For those of you who don't know, this is how we let's just say flash disk. Okay, these are flash disks. Now, I believe many of you have bought flash disks, or at one point you need to buy flash disks. Now, when you buy in Kampala, when you go to buy a flash disk, you may find a 64 GB disk that is around 15K, and you find another 64 GB that is around maybe 25K or even 30K. In most cases, most of us opt for the cheaper ones. We opt for the cheaper ones. By luck, you might find a cheaper one that is okay. But in most cases, these cheaper ones have issues. And the issues come because of the file systems these have. File systems are usually ways storage devices store data or store information. A cheaper one will have different file systems from the expensive ones, and that's why it's cheaper. Some of these cheap ones, that's where you put your files, you come to open them, and they can't open anymore, or they are corrupt, or the flash itself can't read anymore. Out of the blue, it just dies. Those are the cheaper ones. The expensive ones are usually more reliable. Though still, it depends on where you're buying it. Because in the same Kampala, you find the 15K one being sold to you at 25K. Okay? I usually advise on some brands that are least reliable. One brand I usually trust is the SanDisk. That's a very reliable brand. That one, even though they sell you at, it's at least reliable. The other brands I trust, at least I've worked with, are Transcend. There are things like Lexus. At times even Samsung. Though at times Samsung, they bring a lot of duplicates in it. At least those are some good brands you can always purchase when you're looking for a reliable flash disk. Now we come to a hard disk and an SSD. SSD, not South Sudan, solid state drive. Hard disk, HDD is hard disk drive. Now, Hard disk is an older technology, an older storage. SSD is a newer. But all of them are primary storage devices. What do I mean primary? If you're having a computer, they're the main devices where your information is stored. Are we together? When you save a document, it's stored there. When you download a movie, it's stored on these devices. That's why we are saying that they're primary. Secondary storage devices could be things like that, the flash, the cloud storage, the CDs, etc. Those are secondary. Okay? The hard disk. Let's start with the hard disk. Now, the hard disk, we are saying the hard disk is a primary storage device, and in it, it has moving parts, which are usually moving disks. Now, being that it has moving parts, that would mean it uses a good amount of power. Because to read data from there, it has to constantly run and rotate. Why am I talking about this? If you have a laptop that has a hard disk, it won't be able to store power longer as compared to one that has an SSD. And we are going to see why. Now, this is how a hard disk would look like. Now, this is a hard disk. I hope you notice inside it, it has some disks. Now, there is an arm. This is an arm that reads data from the disk. This disk constantly runs, meaning it needs constant power supply and it uses a lot of power. Now, on the other hand, an SSD, which is a solid state drive, is a newer technology which doesn't have moving parts in it. That means it's way faster and it uses less power. But with that, it's more expensive. Are we together? So if you're buying a computer and they say it has an SSD, in most cases it will be expensive than a computer that has a hard disk. Even when you're planning to replace your hard disk with an SSD, if you have a hard disk of, let's say, 500 GB and an SSD of the same size, you may find the SSD is double or at times even 3 times the price of the hard disk. That's because of, first of all, it's a newer technology. It runs way faster. It uses less power. That's why it's a little bit expensive. But if your computer has a hard disk and you're okay with it, it's very fine. But of course, in the near future, all of us are moving to SSDs. The hard disks will phase out. I hope we are together. Now, this is how an SSD looks like. We can have the SSD chip. The chip looks okay. It's as small as that. And you'll find something as small as that, it can store up to 2 terabytes. I hope you know that a terabyte is 1000 GB, right? Find something as small as that, it can store 2 terabytes. Then we can have such an SSD. This is also an SSD. But this particular SSD is a kind of SSD that was made for computers that don't have a slot that can take this kind of SSD. We are saying both of these are SSDs. Just that this kind is one that I can use to replace okay. Let me just bring up. Okay. Okay, let's use this image right here. Okay, so this will help us understand this better. So the first, what you see under here is a hard disk. These are actually these are three. On top we have this on top here. This is an SSD but the cheap type. Cheap for SHIP, not cheap for low price. Then we have this other SSD. And we have this as the hard disk. Now you notice this interface here and this interface here look exactly the same. I mean this socket and this socket. Now this is where our computer connects onto this hard disk. Inside the computer there is a connector that goes here. You notice this kind of socket looks exactly the same as. That means where this hard disk can connect, this SSD, this one here can also connect. Okay? So what does that mean? If I'm having a hard disk in my computer and I want to switch to an SSD, I just remove this and I use the same connector for this. Are we together? This is an SSD, this is a hard disk. But since they have the same connection kind, I can just switch from the hard disk to the SSD. That would work for a computer that has no place where I can connect this kind of SSD on top. We are saying these two on top are all SSDs, but they have different connectors. Okay? Now it's important to understand these two kinds of SSDs. Because you may have your computer at home, but you want to change. You want to move from a hard disk to an SSD. At least the technician should, you may not be able to open yourself, but the technician should, once the technician opens, at least they don't have to confuse you. Okay? If your computer has no slot that takes this, then at least it will have a slot that where this hard disk was, you can put this. Now, if you have a computer that has a slot for this and this, then you can put two kinds of SSDs. Are we together? Okay. So we are saying SSDs are newer, they are faster, they store power longer. If you have a computer that has an SSD, it can even store power up to 8 hours. That's how powerful they are. Let's move to cloud storage. Now, this is a storage many of us have used, but even we don't know that we have used it. Now, when we talk about the cloud, apart from maybe some of us here who have flown in a plane, we always don't reach the clouds. We just see them. The same applies here. A cloud form of storage is a physical storage we can't access physically. Are we together? We access it via the internet. There are storage devices somewhere. We can store our information there, but physically we can't get to them. We can only access them via the internet. Now here is a good example that we can use. I believe some of you at one point you have lost your phones, smartphones. And maybe you're running your WhatsApp there, maybe you had your contacts there. Some of us were not, maybe you were not able to recover your messages, but I believe some of you were. How were you able to recover them? You can speak up. You were giving a submission. He says you store them on someone says you store them on Gmail. Now, Gmail is just a pathway that connects you to what is said, the Google. Now, Google is a whole set of services that as long as you have a Gmail, you can access these services. We'll see these services. And one of those services is the Google Drive. You must have heard of Google Drive, some of you. Now, Google Drive is a service that is under Google. And as long as I have a Gmail account or a Google account, I can access Google Drive. Google Drive is a kind of cloud storage. It's cloud because physically I can't access it, but physically these devices are there. A good example we have seen here, your phone is stolen, you had your important messages there, but it's important to back up messages. Nowadays, WhatsApp messages are used as evidence in court. So yes, they're used as evidence. So it's important you back them up. Backing up your contacts. As long as you have an account on Gmail, you can set your applications on your phone to back up your information in the cloud. Now, Google gives you up to 15 GB of free space. Some of you have worked with Google Drive. Once your space is getting full, they usually warn you that your space is about to get full. And they can even advise you to buy. Because 15 GB is just free, but you can say I want to buy a whole terabyte. Let's try and check here the prices. Let's see. In case your 15 GBs get occupied, you can choose to. Okay, so they're saying for personal free plans, you have 15 GB. If your 15 GBs are full, you can go ahead and pay for what they call the basic plan, which is 100 GBs, but every month you pay. This is actually $2. That is like 6,000 or 7,000, isn't it? Then if you want a terabyte, so why am I showing you this? In case your 15 GBs are done and you have your money, you can pay for the storage. You buy extra storage. It's a little secure for some of you. For some of you who have, for example, you've lost your WhatsApp messages and you want to recover them, you're able to recover them from the cloud storage. Another good example where we can use this, if you have important documents, let's say you have land titles, you have marriage certificates, you have education certificates, etc. You can always scan them and have soft copies there. Because you never know what would happen to the hard copy. You may come one day when they have been stolen or they have anything has happened or water. Reprocessing them could take a lot of time. At times you may need to have a quick backup as you reprocess. So you can always back up your important documents in what we are calling the cloud storage. Now here are just a few tips we should at least know, especially if we are using the free kind. Google is giving only 15 GBs of free storage. That means you should also be responsible on how you use it. Don't go ahead and set your phone to back up even videos there. Are we together? Some people even go ahead and put movies there. 3 or 4 movies can fill up the 15 GBs. So I would advise that you put only important documents. Maybe there are exams, let's say, I think most of you are teachers. You can put your sample questions there, such that today, even though I haven't moved with my computer and I moved somewhere, as long as I log into my email, I can access my files there. I hope we are together. The beauty with cloud storage, all I need is internet and a computing device. In the near future, in this class, we'll see how we use applications like Google Documents. I can create a document on this computer. I move to another place, I access a computer there, and I access the same document on a different computer. Okay? That's because there's cloud storage in play. Still with the same, we can be a whole class and we work on the same document. We'll try this as well. So that's cloud storage. But Google Drive is not the only cloud service. If you're using iOS gives you iCloud. I think you've heard of iCloud. iCloud, I think you're given 5 GBs. There's what we call OneDrive. There are so many others, but so far, Google gives the most free space. The rest give around 5 GBs. Okay, now I want us to get into the practical bit. If you have a working computer, you can try power it up. We are not going to use internet. Yeah, we are not going to use internet. There should be F1 on the keyboard. Now, we are saying a computer system is made up of the hardware and the software. So far, we have looked at the hardware. We want to get into the software, but from the practical view. Now, if you're to look at your computer, if you're to check out your computer, there should be a button that looks something like this. I think it's student. The password should be student. I think it's in small. Lab attendant. If you have a problem with the password, there are people who have problems with the password. So if you look at your computer, for those who are totally newbies to computers, there should be a button that looks something like this. We call this the power button or the switch. Now, if you're using a system, a desktop system that has a systems unit and a monitor, if you power on the systems unit, you also have to power on the monitor. The monitor has a switch as well, but it also looks something like that. For a laptop, there's always one switch. Yeah, for a laptop, there's always one switch. At times it's on the side, depending on the make of the laptop you have. Now, when we power on our computer, the moment you press that power button, a few things happen. I believe you have heard of the process of booting. What do you know about booting? Anyone who has heard about booting? Yes. Booting is the process of starting up a computer. Once I power on that power button, my computer will start to power up via a process we call booting. And as our computer boots, there is a software that handles the process. We usually call that the firmware. And the main firmware our computers have is what we call the BIOS. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System. Now, what does the BIOS do? The BIOS will execute what we call the POST or the power on self-test. The BIOS executes what we call the power on self-test. Now, what happens in the power on self-test? The BIOS will check if the crucial hardwares are there. Now, we have looked at some of these crucial hardwares. Hardwares that if they are not present in our computer, it won't work. The CPU, there's no how computer can power up or work without that. The memory and the storage. So what happens? As soon as I power on my computer, the BIOS will check, is there a CPU? If there is no CPU, depending on the make of computer you have, some computers will blink, the keyboard will blink when there is no display on the desktop. Some computers, they'll produce beeping sounds. I hope you've heard some computers beep. That would mean the CPU or the RAM isn't there. Now, if the CPU is there, the BIOS will check if the memory is present. Are we together? If the memory isn't there, my computer won't power on. If the memory is there, then the computer will check, is there a storage device? If there's a storage device, it will check, is this storage device bootable? Now, bootable means that this storage device has an operating system. An operating system could be, now for your smartphones, you have Android. Some of you have iOS. That's the operating system of your phone. It's what handles each and every process in your phone. It links the hardware and the software and the user applications. So if I have a storage device and it is bootable, that's when my computer will power up, and I see such a display when it has fully powered up. Before it gets here, I'll see the Windows logo if it's a Windows machine. If it's an Apple machine, I'll see the Apple logo. Okay, I hope we are still together. So, we are saying the BIOS handles what we call the post. It checks for the hardware devices that are present. If the crucial, now, if a device such as a keyboard isn't there, my computer won't fail to power up. A keyboard is important, but it's not crucial. It's not a device that directly controls the operation of my computer, like the CPU and the RAM. If my computer has no speakers, now let's take a scenario of your smartphones. Assuming the microphone in your phone gets a problem, doesn't your phone power up? It powers up. That's because a microphone. That's because a microphone is just a device that helps us execute some tasks, but it doesn't directly impact the running of the smartphone. The same applies here. So we are saying once the post is done by the BIOS, our operating system is opened up. Right? Now, we can have different kinds of operating systems. We have the Windows, which is running on most of these machines. Mac OS, I think you've heard of the Apple computers. We have the Android, which is running on most of our smartphones. iOS, nowadays we even have Linux. We have Chrome, and many more. All these operating systems. Now, the operating system is usually a bridge between your hardware and the user applications. That was just an overview of what happens when we switch on our computer. When we switch on our computer, it boots up, it checks, it does the post to the point where we are able to see something on our computer or even your phone. Your phone also boots up. Booting is not only for these other computers. The phone is a computer as well. This brings us to what software is. Now, a software are usually sets of instructions that run a computer. They run a computer depending on the user's tasks. Those are softwares. And that softwares can come in categories. You have the system software, the user applications, and the utilities, which are in most cases under the user applications. Now, the system software are what we can call the crucial softwares. You've noticed we are saying that one of the one of the examples of system software, one of the types is the firmware, right? And we are saying an example of a firmware is the BIOS. We have just seen that once I power on my computer, the BIOS is what handles everything. Are we together? It's what checks if my RAM is there, my processor is there. Now, just take a case where my BIOS has a problem. You think my computer will power up? It won't power up. And that's why we are saying it's crucial. Are we together? Because without it, I can't identify the processor. My computer won't totally power up. And that helps us define what system softwares are. They are those important softwares that without which a computer can't operate. They directly control the hardware. I hope we are together. Another example of a system software is the operating system. Now, the main purpose of the operating system is to bridge the hardware and the user. In other words, if I have my WhatsApp, I can only be able to use my WhatsApp if my phone is either running Android or iOS or etc. If I have my TikTok, there's no way you can access TikTok without Android. If you have your Gmail on your phone, there's no way you can access that app without the. We are saying Android is an operating. The same applies to the computer. The computer will use Windows, etc. And that's how crucial these are. But if you've been following, we said once you power on the computer, the first software that takes control is the. That means if my firmware has a problem, there's no way I can still access my operating because it's the first. Firmware comes first, then the operating system comes second. Are we together? So this is just laid out something to help us try and understand. We have the hardware. The firmware is what directly controls our hardware. The firmware helps the computer identify the operating system. And the operating system is where applications, let's say Microsoft Word, let's say Excel, let's say Chrome, etc. So there's no way all this can work in case our firmware has a problem. And still there's no way the firmware can operate in case things like the CPU have a problem, things like the RAM have a problem, etc. I hope we are together. Okay. So in summary, that's the breakdown of how. That's the breakdown of how a computer boots up and you're able to access these programs. Now, the next phase, I want us to get a little practical. Once you've powered on your computer, for those who have working computers, let's try and power them up. We can share the few that we have. We can. Okay. Now, as soon as you power on your computer, these are some of the when you power on your computer, This is the window you'll see for a computer. If you're using a phone, you see what we call the home screen. For a computer, we call this the desktop. We call this the desktop view or area. So whenever someone say access your desktop, desktop view / area, whatever you see is part of what we call the desktop. Now the desktop is the first interface we'll usually access on a computer. I hope those who have your computers up and running, you're seeing this. I'm recording this session, so I'm recording the session. So even though you're not able to, you don't have a working computer, at least I'll share the video. In your free time, you try and practice. Okay, so in the desktop window, here are some of the things we identify. There are a number of icons. Okay, what you see here are all icons, and our icons can come in categories. We have the file icons, the folder icons, program icons. If I see an icon like this is a folder. Maybe the question would be, what's a folder? A folder is just a container of files. Just like the physical folders we have. You can have your physical folder, you put your different documents here. The same happens here to a folder. You can put different kinds of files here. Then we have file icons. For example, this is a file icon. An icon is just a shortcut that helps us access an item. For example, if I double clicked on this, it will open up this video. This is a video. If I double click this, it will open up the folder. Double clicking is when I left click twice. Are we together? Then we have program icons. Okay, this is an icon that helps me open this particular program. This is a program icon. Then we have the file icons. These are different files. This is another file, etc. When we come at the bottom here, we have what we call the taskbar. If you have a working computer next to you, you should be able to okay, you should be able to see this bar right here, the one, for some computers it may be black, and it may also appear different depending on the version of Windows you have. My computer is running Windows 11. If you go to the other lab we used yesterday, you'll have exactly the same, but the computers here are running Windows 10. But still, the items don't differ. Okay, so one of the very noticeable icons, here is this right here. This icon here. Now this is like the pathway that I can use to access anything I want on my computer. At times we can call this the start button. At times it's called the start menu. Though when I tap the start button, that's when I get the start menu. At times we also call it the Windows button, etc. When you tap on that button, this is what you'll get. It will show me some of the applications that have been pinned onto the start bar. I'm able to see some of the files I've worked with. When I click on all, I'm able to see all the files, all the programs that are in my computer, and I can click on any. If there's a program I don't see, I can As well, search for it. There's a search bar at the top. I just type the name and I'm able to get it. Now, if you're using Windows 10, once you tap the start bar button and it opens the start menu, you just write the word. You just start writing and it will search for you anything you want. So whenever you're lost on your computer and you want to try and access something, always just run to the start button and type whatever you want to find. If it's a program, let's say Chrome, just type and you'll be able to access it. Hope we are together. Next to that, we have the search button. This is used for searching. If I want to search anything on my computer or the internet, I just tap on it and I can search for anything. Let's say I say Uganda. It will bring for me anything on my computer that relates to Uganda and even goes to the web. That means it can directly connect to the internet as long as I have internet. Okay. Now next to that, we have some other icons. Now, whenever I see icons, we're on the taskbar. The taskbar will have a number of icons. First, I can have icons of programs that I'm using. Let's say, if I look at an icon that has, I hope you can see these underlines here, or the highlights. This would mean I've opened this program. I opened it, though it's not active right now. In other words, I opened it and minimized it. Then if I see an icon like this would mean this is an app I pinned onto the taskbar such that whenever I want to use it, I don't have to first go to the start menu. I just find it on the taskbar. The question would be, how do I pin it there? To pin an app on the taskbar, you head to your start button and you look for the app you want. Let's say I want to pin the calendar on my taskbar. In that, whenever I want to use it, I just access it at the taskbar. This is how I'll do that. I right click on the app. There is an option to pin to taskbar. I hope you see it. Once I pin it, you're able to see it there. So anytime I need it, I'll always find it there. If I want to remove it, the same process. I right click, then unpin. I hope we are together. Okay. Now, there's an app here. Is this active or it's pinned? Why do you say it's pinned? No, it's not. No, this one. Let me remove this. Is it pinned or it's in use? We said applications that are in use will have a highlighted. So this is just pinned. And the same applies to this. So if the applications I frequently use, I can always pin them on my taskbar. Okay. We move to the status and device icons right here. These icons here will show me the status of the different devices that are connected onto my computer. For example, if I have a laptop, this is for the battery. This is for if my computer has speakers, then this is for what is it for? Internet or network. If I'm connected via a cable like this, then it will show such an icon. If you're connected via Wi-Fi, I think you've seen how it shows on your phones. That same icon. Then this is for what did we call this device yesterday? This. None of you was there yesterday. We call this a stylus or a light pen. It's what enables me to write. It's a device you as teachers you need, especially if you're planning to go digital, teach online. You may think of getting one. Then what does this represent? A microphone. And this is for the search. Now, in case I want to have access to these, you notice they showed, I hope you see where my cursor is. I just tap and I'm able to see them. If I want to reduce my volume, if I want to adjust my brightness, now the brightness is reducing here. You won't see it there because that's a different display device. But on my laptop here, it's reducing. If I want to connect to Wi-Fi, I just click here and I can see the networks. I select a network. If I have the password, it will connect. If I want to connect to Bluetooth, at the moment I'm connected to this device, but this is where I can connect to Bluetooth. The laptop also has airplane mode, just like your phone. If I want my laptop to work in energy saver mode, I can do that. There are more options here. If I want to project, etc. If I want to create a hotspot, I hope we have tried to create hotspots on our phones. What's the purpose of a hotspot? Why do you use a hotspot on your phone? Share internet. I can share internet from my laptop as well. Yeah, for example, let me try and demonstrate that. If my internet has an internet source, I can go to settings. Under settings, I go to network. Then among the options I have is the mobile hotspot. If it's my first time using it, I'll have to set the name and the password. I edit, I can set the name, I put this password, I save. After saving, I turn it on. Right now, you should be seeing a network on your encode color on your phones. Are we able to see it? I've created a hotspot called color. And as people connect, the password is 2025 NOV 3. I want you to try and connect, and we do this practically. Here is the password. 2025 NOV 3. Let's try and connect. The password, the hotspot is called color. Is someone successful with connecting? Okay. Now, I hope you can see that you're able to see who is connected. Someone with an iPhone P38 has connected. Someone with a Lenovo has connected. Someone with a Tecno Pop 10 has connected. So you can see in real time who is connecting. Now, the only limitation of this is that you can connect only 8 devices. So you can't have 100 people and connect them via your laptop. It connects up to 8 devices. So now they're telling me 4 are already taken up. That means 4 to go. And you can even block some people from connecting. So that's how it works. That's how it works. You can share your internet from your computer. At the end here, we have the network notifications. I mean the date and time. The date and time. Now, in case you want to set your date and time, oh, okay, I think let's wait for the generator. They'll. Okay, meanwhile, we can see the next phase. The next phase of what we are going to look at is how we see the specifications of our phone. How we see the specifications, things like the RAM, things like the CPU and the storage in our phones and also the computer. But since the computers are off, let's start with the phones. Now, why do you need to be able to know how to do this? Don't go to buy a phone or a computer. They tell you it has 8 GBs of RAM, yet it has 1 or 2, right? In this Kampala, it no longer shocks. In Kampala, it doesn't shock to find such. They tell you the storage is 128 GB, and you find out it's 8 GB. Let's start with the phone. How do you do that? On our phone, we'll go to settings. We'll go to settings. Are we there? Now, on most phones, on some phones, depending on the Android version you have, you may see about phone for some phones. Are there some who are saying that? Now, if you're not seeing about phone or about device, some phones will say my device or my phone. Then others will have a section named system. Yeah, if your phone has system, you can tap on that. If your phone has about phone, tap on that. If your phone has my phone, tap on that. My device, tap on that. Are you able to see some of the things we have been talking about? Your RAM, your ROM. You can share screenshots and share in the group. It's very secure. It doesn't have your details. You should be able to see your storage. You should be able to see your your RAM, and your processor. Now, for some phones, even there's an option that reads all specs. Do you see that? For some phones, when you scroll down, you see all specs. I mean, when you open about phone, under about phone, you'll find all specs for some phones. Yeah, you can tap there and you'll see more. And still in the same panel, you're able to see your Android version, and even if it's not up to date, you'll see an option to update it. I hope you have been able to see that. If you don't see your memory there, you can just go. Most of the phones nowadays have an option to search the settings. You can just write there RAM, and it will bring for you the RAM. If you want storage, you search storage. That's how easy it has gotten. Now for the computer, let me open the output for us. I hope you have been successful with that. Someone who has been able to do that, you can share a screenshot just of the about phone. I shared some already in the group. It's not bringing. Let me come and see. The group is locked. Yeah, that was accidental. I think I blocked accidentally. I didn't. It shows me now. What did it do? So you can just always search. Let me. That was accidental blocking. I think it's open now. Okay, let me.